The air in the room hums with a cold, steady rhythm, machines beeping, oxygen hissing softly. Stephen lies on the bed, skin paper-thin, veins tracing blue lines down his arms. His eyes flutter open as I step closer, and for a moment I see confusion, then recognition, then fear. "Mark," he croaks, "you came." I don't answer, I just stand there, my reflection fractured in the glass between us. It's been 2 years since I last saw him, 2 years since he took everything from me with a single smug smile and the turn of a pen. He swallows hard. "The doctors, they said you're the only match." His voice trembles and it feels almost poetic, the sound of a man who once thought he owned the world, now begging for breath. I glance at the heart monitor, beep, beep, steady. "And what makes you think," I say quietly, "that I'd save you?" He flinches just slightly, but enough. His pride, still alive somewhere beneath the illness, keeps him from crying. "The nurse calls me Mr. Lawson." The name still feels foreign on my tongue, like a title I don't deserve anymore. As I turn to leave, Stephen's voice cracks one more time. "Please, you're my brother." I pause in the doorway. "You should have remembered that," I say, "when you signed the papers." And then I leave him with his machines. My name is Mark Lawson, and 2 years ago my brother taught me that greed cuts deeper than blood. The sound of rain against the courthouse windows was steady that morning, almost kind, compared to the words echoing inside. "To my eldest son, Stephen Lawson," the lawyer read aloud, "I leave the family estate, the business holdings, and all remaining assets." My hands clenched on my knees. I looked to my mother's portrait on the wall, her eyes soft, gentle, and I couldn't understand how this could be right. "And to my younger son, Mark Lawson," the lawyer continued, clearing his throat, "I leave my father's wristwatch with the hope he will always remember the value of time." There was a pause, long and cruel. Stephen didn't hide his smile, he even had the audacity to pat my shoulder. "You always liked the sentimental things anyway," he whispered. I felt everyone's gaze shift toward me, a few sympathetic, most awkward, but I didn't speak. I knew if I opened my mouth the grief would spill out like floodwater. Instead, I stood, nodded once, and walked out into the rain. That was the moment I realized I was alone in the world, and that silence, not anger, would be my greatest weapon. It didn't take him long. 2 weeks after the funeral, I found movers on the porch of our family home. My home. The men were carrying out boxes of memories, mother's sewing machine, father's chair, the bookshelf I'd built at 17. Stephen stood in the driveway, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky. "Nothing personal, Mark," he said, as if that made it better. "The place is sold. Market's hot. I couldn't let it sit." "You couldn't wait a month?" I asked. He shrugged. "Grief doesn't pay property tax." I should have hit him, I should have screamed. But I didn't. I just stared at him, at the brother who'd turned our bloodline into a transaction. When the last box was gone, I locked the door one final time. He leaned against his car, smiling. "You'll bounce back," he said. "I will," I replied. "Just don't forget life has a funny way of balancing books." The months that followed were quiet and cruel. I rented a small room behind a hardware store, sleeping on a mattress that dipped in the middle. I worked double shifts fixing plumbing, wiring, patching roofs, anything to stay busy. Each night I'd wind my father's watch and tell myself I was rebuilding, even when the world said I was fatting. Stephen, meanwhile, was everywhere. Newspaper photos of him at charity galas, smiling beside people who didn't know the kind of man he was. He had everything: money, a wife who adored him, a new business he bragged about endlessly. But arrogance is a debt collector, and Stephen had no idea his bill was coming due. The first sign came when his company's logo vanished from the newspaper. Then the whispers: bad investments, a partner lawsuit, a scandal involving missing funds. I didn't gloat, I didn't call, I just kept fixing roofs, winding my watch and waiting. 2 years later, I was tightening a bolt beneath a client's sink when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Mr. Lawson?" a woman's voice asked. "This is Mercy General Hospital. Your brother listed you as next of kin." The wrench slipped from my hand, clattering into the dark. When I arrived, the doctor's tone was professional but heavy. "He's in renal failure. He's been on the transplant list for months, but his condition is worsening. You're a compatible match." I stared at the clipboard, the sterile white walls. Compatible, the word echoed. Stephen was sleeping when I entered his room, thinner, smaller, a ghost of the man who once looked down on me. There were photos on the table beside him, our parents, him smiling at his wedding, a newspaper clipping from his business days. I stood there for a long time, not out of pity but memory. He'd taken everything I had, and now life had brought him back to ask for the one thing he couldn't buy. I turned toward the window, watching the city lights flicker against the night. Just as it seemed had a sense of timing. When Stephen woke up, his eyes searched the room until they found me sitting quietly in the corner. For the first time, I saw fear where arrogance used to live. "I didn't think you'd come," he said softly. His voice was weak, but his pride tried to steady it. "I almost didn't," I answered. He hesitated, licking dry lips. "They told me you're the only one who can help, please, Mark." "Mark," I corrected. He blinked. The silence that followed was heavy, a lifetime of resentment hanging in the air. "I'll make it up to you," he whispered. "Everything, you'll get your share, I'll rewrite the will." I let out a quiet laugh. "You think this is about money?" His expression faltered. He didn't understand, and maybe that was the most satisfying part. I stood. "Rest, Stephen, you'll need your strength." He tried to grab my arm as I walked past, but his hand trembled and fell short. For the first time, he looked small to me, not because of the illness, but because the illusion of power was gone. I spent that night driving aimlessly through town, past the diner we used to fight over pancakes in, past the churchyard where our parents lay. In my glove box was a folder I'd kept sealed for 2 years, proof of what Stephen did. Emails, bank transfers, legal forms our mother had signed under his manipulation. I'd kept them not for revenge, but for understanding, to remind myself it wasn't my fault. But as I stared at those papers again, I realized something. Stephen's downfall wasn't finished. His second company was still afloat, barely. The news had been quiet. But I'd been watching. He had partners and they didn't know who he really was. I didn't need to ruin him, I just needed to let the truth breathe. By morning, anonymous copies of those files were in the hands of every one of his investors. The next week, the city whispered his name again, but this time, it wasn't in praise. I watched from my truck as reporters gathered outside his office building. His assistant carried boxes of files, face pale with panic. "Financial misconduct," the radio said, "possible fraud investigation." Stephen called me that night. I didn't answer. He left a message, his voice breaking halfway through. "I don't know what's happening, Mark, please, I need your help, they're freezing my accounts." I sat in silence, the phone screen glowing against the darkness of my room. Funny how he called me Mark again, like no time had passed, like nothing had changed. 3 days later he asked to see me. Against my better judgment I went. He was sitting by the window, hospital gown hanging loose around his shoulders. His wedding ring was gone, his eyes looked haunted. "They've taken everything," he said, voice barely a whisper. "The house, the company, even Marissa left." I folded my arms. "You took everything from me too, difference is I learned to live without it." He looked up sharply. "You think I deserve this?" I hesitated. The honest answer was yes, but something in his tone made me pause. "No one deserves to die begging," I said quietly, "but karma doesn't take bribes." His mouth twisted. "You're enjoying this." "No," I said, "I'm remembering." That night, a thunderstorm rolled over the city, washing the streets clean. I sat in my truck outside the hospital, engine off, rain pounding the windshield. For 2 years I had dreamed of seeing him suffer, and now that it was here I felt empty. It wasn't victory I wanted, it was peace. And peace, I realized, only comes when you stop letting someone live rent-free in your head. As lightning split the sky, I made a decision. I wouldn't save him, but I wouldn't destroy him either. His own choices had already done that. Tomorrow I'd tell the doctors my answer. I started the engine, the wipers scraping rhythmically across the glass. "Goodbye, Stephen," I murmured to the rain. The doctor's office smelled of disinfectant and paper, that sterile blend that makes everything feel permanent. "Mr. Lawson," she said gently, "you're the only living relative with a compatible kidney. Your brother's odds without a donor aren't good." I met her eyes. She was kind, but her sympathy felt misplaced. "Then I hope he makes peace with himself," I said. She hesitated. You're certain? Yes. As I signed the refusal, my hand didn't shake. It felt like closing the final chapter of a long, ugly book. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, faint but insistent. I took it as a sign. My business had started small, just me, a truck, and a handful of loyal clients. But by the time Stephen's world began crumbling, mine was quietly flourishing. Word of mouth spread fast in small towns. People trusted me because I showed up, did the work, and kept my word, 3 things my brother never understood. I hired 2 more men, then 4. We built decks, rewired homes, restored barns. I started sleeping well again. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the shop window, cleaner clothes, steadier hands, my father's watch still on my wrist. The same town that once whispered about the Lawson scandal now greeted me with nods and respect. I wasn't rich, but I had something better, peace, built from the rubble of his greed. One morning, as I poured coffee in the diner, the TV above the counter flashed a headline. Former businessman Stephen Lawson under investigation for tax evasion and fraud. The waitress glanced at me. Ain't that your brother? I took a slow sip of coffee. Used to be. The anchor's voice droned on, words like embezzlement and forfeiture filling the air. Photos of Stephen, once polished, powerful, now looked worn, desperate. They showed footage of him leaving court, reporters shouting questions. He didn't answer any. In that moment, I didn't feel joy, just a quiet, haunting sense of balance. The universe, it seemed, was efficient. That evening, I received a letter, handwritten. The envelope had been folded and refolded, edges smudged. Mark, I know I've done terrible things. I was proud, stupid. I thought money made me untouchable. You were always the better man. Please help me, not because I deserve it, because I'm still your brother. Stephen. I read it 3 times. The words helped me pressed into the page like a wound that wouldn't close. For a second, the old instinct stirred, the part of me that wanted to fix everything, to be the bigger person. But then I remembered the day he sold our home, the way he smiled while I stood in the rain with nowhere to go. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the drawer beneath my father's watch. Some debts, I decided, are paid in silence. A week later, the final blow came. Stephen's company was seized, his accounts drained by legal fees. The mansion he once flaunted was auctioned. The press moved on to fresher scandals, leaving him like a carcass after vultures have fed. When I visited the cemetery that Sunday, I found him there, sitting cross-legged by our parents' graves, shoulders hunched, eyes hollow. He didn't look up as I approached. I lost everything, he said quietly. No, I corrected, you gave it away. He let out a bitter laugh. Guess I finally learned what you meant about life-balancing books. We stood there in silence, 2 brothers, one broken by greed, the other rebuilt by loss. As I turned to leave, he said softly, "You're not going to help me, are you?" I didn't look back. I already did, I said, by walking away before I became like you.